Yeah, we got a Tour de France 2018 going on. And yeah, this is just kind of a discussion. This is a way to purge or rant or just kind of talk about things that happened in the stages that might be interesting. You could say for people that are just laymen or don't really know anything about the Tour de France, maybe this is a way to learn things. For instance, this year they're going clockwise. That basically means that if they start over on the Atlantic Ocean side of France, then they will work their way north towards the border with Belgium, and then they would come around along the border of Germany, and then working their way down towards the Alps and Switzerland, and then coming across down by the Mediterranean Sea, and then finishing in the Pyrenees before they jump and finish up on the last day in Paris, which is essentially not really a race until the end, when then the sprinters try to get their last little bit of glory by winning on the Champs Elysees. So what they do is they come into Paris, and they usually start about, I don't know, 20 miles or so outside of Paris in the suburbs, and then they ride into Paris, and then they go around the Champs Elysees, up around the Arc de Triomphe, and then eventually they finish there on the Champs Elysees. So when they do that, then the alternate year they go counterclockwise. So then maybe they start up around the Belgian border and or around the Normandy beaches, and then they go south to the Pyrenees, then across the Mediterranean, and then finish in the Alps before then jumping to the last stage there in Paris. So far, uh, I've only watched up through stage three. So I watch it in the evening. So it's kind of the end of that day rather than watch it in real time. In stage one, it's a pretty flat stage. So and it's early in the race. So the GC, the general classification, the riders that are going for yellow, their main thing is just stay out of trouble, don't get injured in any crashes, don't end up where the peloton splits and then they're in the backside of the peloton, and then due to crosswinds, you can't jump across that gap to the front part of the peloton. And if that happens, then you could lose 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds and already kind of get yourself in a hole. So, ironically, Nairo Quintana, that's already kind of happened to him. So the only thing that maybe has helped him a little bit is Froome and Richie Porte. Chris Froome, the previous winner, and Richie Porte, who used to be on Froome's team Sky, who's now on Team BMC. And by the way, last year Richie Porte was riding really well and was a potential threat to Chris Froome, and then Porte crashed and was injured and had to drop out of the race. So he's kind of hoping while he's still in his prime, he needs to just survive the Tour de France, but then not only survive, but thrive. So um, Quintana, it's funny. There's been some anger towards Quintana because he seems to tease his talent. He's a smaller guy, so he's a really good climber, but he's not necessarily great in the time trial. And for people who don't know, the time trial is essentially a single or team, as each individual team or as a single rider. You just ride a course against the clock. And each person starts, and then let's say there's like a 3 minute gap, and then the second person starts, and then a 3 minute gap, and the third person starts. So if somebody is a really fast rider, they will be able to catch the person who started ahead of them. So then they would actually gap them and make up that 3 minutes. So, you can think about somebody starting, let's say, 3 minutes ahead of somebody on that stage, and they could have the same overall time, the cumulative time of the race. And if the person who started, second catches that person and then let's say finishes 10 seconds ahead of them on that time trial, they would actually have gained that 3 minutes and then plus that 10 seconds just from that one stage. I remember Lance Armstrong did that I want to say to an Italian guy, can't remember his last name, started with a B, going up Alpe d'Huez, which is like a vertical climb that twists and turns. Anyway, the Italian guy, I believe, started, let's say, 2 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong. And with like, let's say, 2 kilometers to the finish, Lance caught the guy and then passed him. So he pretty much just, pimp slapped that guy down just from that one stage, had they even been close up to that point. So the reason why I kind of have mixed feelings about Quintana is, so Quintana is on Movistar, and that's kind of a Spanish team. And it has this guy, Alejandro Valverde, who's done really well in the past, but is now getting older. And, he's kind of fading a little bit, but he's still strong enough, let's say, to finish potentially in the top 3 or 4. And you could kind of say Movistar is Valverde's team. So where does that put Quintana? And that's why I have to say I do have a little bit more empathy for him, because he's from Colombia. He's a South American. So here he's a Spanish speaker, but he's kind of potentially on the outside looking in, because Valverde is considered the team leader. And even you could say Valverde, when he makes a call regarding tactics or who he wants on that team, they're going to listen to him. So keep that in mind when Quintana maybe struggles. But then at the same token, maybe one of the reasons why the team doesn't fully trust Quintana is because he hasn't shown that they can really trust him. Or he seems to lack like a cutthroat attacking mindset. He will attack in the mountains, but when it comes to the flatter stages, or when it comes to, being a good time trialist, Quintana just seems to lack luck or an edge. Anyway, it seems like year after year, before they even get to the mountains, Quintana will already be in like, 4th or 5th or 6th place and, a minute down. So he's like already in the hole before they even hit the mountains. So an example of that with Quintana is a year or two ago, the peloton split. Quintana did not ensure he was in the front, let's say 30% of the peloton. He got caught more in the middle or in the back third. There was a crash, or the winds created an opportunity for the guys on the front of the peloton to take off. That created a gap, and Quintana was left behind, and he couldn't bridge across, because you have to think about it, right? If you're in a group of like 20, 30, 40 riders, and you're able to help pace off of each other and create a slipstream, once the peloton splits and you get like a 20, 30, 40-foot gap, whoever is going to jump from the back of the peloton across that gap to the leading half, they have to make it across that 20, 30, 40 feet on their own while they're being buffeted by the crosswinds. So if they can do that, then once they get into that front half, they can get back into the slipstream, they can conserve a little energy, and then they can just sort of stay along with it. The problem is, when that first half of the peloton gets 80, 90, 100 feet, or even 150, 200 feet, now it's too far for a rider or even 2 or 3 riders to get across that gap. They just get buffeted too much by the wind. They get exhausted, and then they drag back, or they get caught in no man's land where they're 15 seconds behind the front half and only like 6 seconds ahead of the back half. So they're expending all that energy, and all they've gained is 6 seconds, which then maybe can cause them to do worse in subsequent stages, because they expended so much energy and they can't recover. So that's happened to Quintana. And then also think about it. If you're in that second half of the peloton, it's one thing if you're right at the point where the peloton splits. If you react fast enough, you can ride balls out, get across that gap when it's just 30, 40, 50 feet. But if you're further back, you then have to expend all that energy to weave your way through maybe 60 feet of riders to then jump another 80, 90, 100 feet And if you haven't reacted fast enough, it's game over. Anyway, so that's happened to Quintana. And you have to wonder, like, okay, dude, come on. If you're riding for GC, if you're riding for yellow, why do you get caught back sort of casually riding and pacing yourself in the back half of the peloton when you should be up in the front? And or is it because maybe they made you go back and get water like a domestique? So what happens is on a team, there's the domestiques. Those are sort of the helpers. They're there just to go back to the peloton, to the team cars, get water, get food, get instructions, ride back up through the peloton to get to their teammates and the team leader to then hand off the fluids. And or their job is just to burn themselves out to pace their team leader through a rough part of a stage. And then what you'll see is these guys will push and push and push on the front of the peloton or near the front, helping to protect and pace their team leader. And then when they hit the last mountain and there's 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers to go to the finish, they're just done. They hit the wall and they go from riding, 15 miles an hour uphill to like 4 miles an hour where they're barely able to keep their bike upright because they're just completely gassed. So this is the other thing. When you see a rider and you look at the overall standings and you think, oh, this guy's a dumbass. This guy, out of 176 riders, let's say 6 of them have dropped out due to injury or sickness. So there's 170 riders. Oh, they're in like 150th place and they're like 50 minutes behind the guy in yellow. Okay, you can't look at it like that because that guy, the reason why he's 50 minutes back is because he's been killing himself and riding super hard every day until the last, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles from the finish. And then they're so burned out, they lose 5-10 minutes a day. So after like 10 days, they're already down 50 minutes. But if they were just riding conservatively, or if they were the one getting support, maybe they would be in, 15th place or 12th place and only like 7 minutes back. So you have to be careful. Also, a person who's like 20 minutes back and in 30th place, they can go balls out on a given stage and go for the win and then get a little glory for themselves and their team and their sponsor, even if overall, they're in like 30th place and, 15 minutes back. Okay, so basically in stage 1, it followed kind of like the typical, there were 3 guys in the breakaway. They got about 2, 3, 4 minutes in front of the main peloton. They got caught. They almost always get caught because the peloton can just sort of leave them hanging out there and, keep that gap at maybe, 2, 3, 4 minutes, knowing that they can crank it up and catch them at least with, 5 or 10 kilometers to go. Every now and again, maybe 1 out of every 5 to 10 breakaways, they'll survive, or at least one guy will survive, one rider, and they can win the stage. And sometimes it's really heartbreaking. You'll see them, they'll be like 500 meters from the finish, and here comes the peloton, blows right by them, and, it's over kind of thing. So, you get the beautiful scenery of France. So it's a great promo for the countryside of France. You can kind of pick and choose what village you want to go stay in just from the aerial shots and the shots from the motorcycles that follow the riders. So sometimes the crosswinds, especially when they're over there near the English Channel or the Atlantic Ocean, the crosswinds, as noted, can cause either a really hard day riding and or can cause a potential split in the peloton. On stage 1, that was not an issue. The only things that kind of happened that were sort of interesting is there was a crash, and it didn't injure Porte or Adam Yates or Froome, but Richie Porte and Adam Yates were in an area of the peloton where it was affected, so that created a split in the peloton, and they lost time. By the time they were able to get around all the guys who were down on the asphalt, there was a gap. But then Froome, he crashed basically by his own fault. He got too close to the edge of the road, and he went off into the grass. But he landed in a field, no harm, no foul, back on the bike, and he's riding. So the nice thing is, or it's not so nice, but for the competition, that gave them a little buffer, because from that happening, Richie Porte, Adam Yates, and Chris Froome came in like 50 seconds behind their GC competition, who were not affected by the crash. Quintana, again, got more bad luck as usual, sort of by his own fault. The road split, and there was like traffic, whatever they call road furniture, with a curb in the middle. He didn't swerve left or swerve right because he was sort of in the middle of the road. By the time he realized it, it was too late, so he had to go straight over it, hit the curb. Was lucky he didn't go over the handlebars and jack himself up, but he got two flats. So he had to wait even longer to get assistance to get two new wheels and tires. So he finished behind Porte, Yates, and Froome. So he already lost time just to his main competitors, Porte and Yates and Froome, but then also to everybody else who finished ahead of them. Some guy from Colombia, sorry, his name is like Gilivier or whatever, he won. He out-sprinted Marcel Kittel, a big German dude, big Aryan-looking German dude. Peter Sagan, either Slovakian or Slovenian, sorry, going off of memory, to respect the Slovenian or Slovakian people. I'll double check that. Anyway, Sagan's a great overall guy. He can sprint, but he also can do pretty good in like rolling hills. So the true sprinters, they're like Ferraris, right? They can go, let's say 50, 60 kilometers an hour, or like 65 kilometers an hour, or maybe even 70 kilometers an hour, right? They can hit like 40 miles an hour in a short burst. But if there's a hill like 1 kilometer before the finish, that knocks them back, and then they're not in position. Where a guy like Sagan, he can get over those little rolling hills, still stay on the front of the peloton, and then be there to out-sprint everybody to the finish. So anyway, Marcel Kittel got dropped, though. Peter Sagan got dropped. Christoph, I think a Russian guy, he got dropped. And this Colombian guy won by like a good solid 2 to 3 bike lengths. So legit pimp slap. You know, he was in the right place at the right time. Greipel, a German dude, kind of looks like Popeye. He was not even really there in the mix, and even neither was Mark Cavendish. Mark Cavendish, guy from the Isle of Man, Brit, probably getting near the end of his career. He used to win, 3-4 stages every tour, so he's trying to eke out a couple more stage wins before it's time for him to be done. Let's see here. Oh, there's a French guy, Demar. He also had some bad luck. He's a guy who's capable of winning in these sprints. He had like a mechanical issue. Anyway, he basically just said shine it and pulled up to save his legs, way before it even became time for the sprint. So he just decided, I'm not trying to win this race. Let me just save my energy and, fight another day.